Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Critic Picks with Alex Udvary. I'm Alex Udvary. I'm going to do something a little bit different here on the podcast today, but something that I think a lot of my listeners will find enjoyable. Now, as a lot of you know, you should be aware of my love of classic comedy, and I've done several episodes on forgotten comedy teams. Most recently, I discussed Clark and McCullough, and prior to that, I've done episodes about Olsen and Johnson, Wheeler and Woolsey, even Brown and Carney. So, I recently learned of Biffle and Shooster, a fictitious 1930s comedy team, and it caught my attention. A DVD has been released by Kino called The Misadventures of Biffle and Shooster, and it features 6 two-reeler comedies. Now, the team is played by Will Ryan, who is Sam Schuster, and Nick Santamaria, who's Benny Biffle. Now, there's always been this interest in contemporary Hollywood to revisit the past. Filmmaker Peter Bogdanovich has repeatedly made movies as a homage to the greats of cinema's past. His comedy What's Up, Doc? Was clearly inspired by Howard Hawks' Bringing Up Baby. His At Long Last Love paid tribute to the musical comedies of the 1930s and featured a Cole Porter score. There's also, more recently, the Academy Award winner The Artist, which was a silent movie released back in 2011. And 2 years after that, a movie called Blanca Neves. It's a lesser-known silent movie from Spain, but equally as good. Now, there's also been filmmakers that have tried to take things a bit further, and they've made movies about newly discovered footage that tries to change the history of cinema as we know it. One very funny example was made by Peter Jackson, and it's called Forgotten Silver. It's about this forgotten pioneer who invented techniques such as the close-up. There was also a short-lived television show on CBS in 1991 called Morton and Hayes, and it was about a forgotten comedy team of the same name and newly discovered comedy shorts. And Rob Reiner was the host of the show, and he would present the shorts to us. It was directed by Christopher Guest, best known for his mockumentaries This Is Spinal Tap and Best in Show. And so the misadventures of Biffle and Shooster seem to carry on in this tradition, and so we are rediscovering a forgotten comedy team, and the DVD provides us with the remaining comedy shorts known to still be in existence. Now, while the characters Biffle and Shooster came from the minds of Will Ryan and Nick Santamaria, all of the shorts are credited as having been written, directed, and produced by Michael Schlesinger. And he's not new to this sort of thing. He's credited as having served as a producer on 2 movies, Dark and Stormy Night and The Lost Skeleton Returns Again. And these were 1930s inspired horror movies. And some of the actors from both of those movies appear here. What I really appreciate most about all of the shorts, all of the Biffle and Shooster shorts, is the attention to detail on the technical side. Some are shot in black and white, and they have that grainy, aged look to them. Others take aim at the 2-color Technicolor process, and in all honesty, everything looks realistic. Now, to add to that realism, before each short begins, we get a title card, and it gives us a brief history of when the shorts were made and how they fit into Biffle and Shooster's work. And it's just that extra step that really creates this authentic quality to everything presented on this DVD. So it really feels as if this is a real comedy team, and we are finding this lost footage, and there's just this whole history that time has seemed to have forgotten about. Now, Shooster is supposed to be the straight man of the team. He's the leader, and Biffle is the comic. Watching all of the shorts, it would seem to me the greatest inspiration for this fictitious team was Abbott and Costello. And Biffle is the Lou Costello of the team, kind of the man-child character that like Lou Costello would at times become too exasperated to finish a sentence and start stuttering. And so this results in Biffle being the more dominant figure of the team, and Shooster at times more in the background. It would have been nice if there was more banter between them in the tradition of Abbott and Costello, or even Wheeler and Woolsey, but it is what it is. I'm not going to review each of the 6 shorts in depth. Instead, I just kind of want to go over each short that's on there, give very broad view opinion of them. So the first short on the DVD is called the Biffle Murder Case. And the background story that we're provided with is this was the 8th of 20 comedy shorts made starring the team, who we're told got their start on vaudeville. It was released June 12th, 1935, and it is a parody of Philo Vance Mysteries. And it stars Edmund Lowell, who would go on to actually play Philo Vance in the Garden murder case 1 year later. And so what's really interesting about this is some of this information is actually true. There really is a movie called The Garden Murder Case, made 1936. Edmund Lowell really is in it, does play Philo Vance. And so these comedy shorts, the entire DVD, obviously, as I'm stating, it's blurring this line between fact and fiction. The other interesting thing about the comedy shorts, the opening credits have these, I guess there's no other way to say it, they're fake. And so the cast and the crew, real people are listed. And I imagine that the people listed as having directed and written these shorts is supposed to some way kind of tip the hat for what kind of comedy it's supposed to be, meaning which real comedy team inspired it. And so for the Biffle murder case, it's directed, you can use air quotes for that, it's directed by James Parrott and written by Lou Breslow. Again, these are real people, and it stars, again, those air quotes, Patsy Kelly, Bob Burns, and Sam McDonald. Again, real people. So what happens is you have actors playing these real people, playing a character in the short. So someone is playing Patsy Kelly as she's playing a character in the comedy. So hopefully that makes sense. I don't know how else to say it. The title of this seems to be a riff on a Laurel and Hardy comedy short called The Laurel Hardy Murder Case, and it was released in 1930. So here Biffle and Shooster are two outsiders that find themselves involved in a murder case, after delivering a large crate to a wealthy family's home, and while there, a dead body is discovered, and it is the body of the son of Andrew Jackson, and the son was the sole heir to his estate. So now, all the remaining heirs, whom live with Mr. Jackson, are suspects in a police lieutenant's investigation. And the police lieutenant is played by Robert Forster, who might be the most recognizable name involved with these shorts. Just like the real 1930s comedy shorts that this aims to replicate, it's the comedians that give the best performance and play characters with the most dominant personalities. In this particular case, the material does try to elevate a butler character named Roosevelt. He's played by the actor Todd Roosevelt. Doesn't quite work, mostly because I felt the actor played the role too modern, and that's something that can be said for a lot of the other performances within the 6 shorts. Sometimes it feels as if the actors are hamming it up just a tad, and it feels like modern actors giving an exaggerated interpretation on how they think actors in the 1930s performed. And so what this does for me is it creates a conflict between the visual, which does look authentic, and the performances that sometimes don't feel as authentic to the time period. Another thing that bothers me is that none of the actors playing the real actors are doing an imitation. These aren't rich little impressions. The reference to the actors in each of the opening credits mainly then seems to serve as a joke for those of us, quote, in the know. But it would have been nice if you're going to refer to these famous character actors, if someone would be giving a performance that tries to capture them. While I had mentioned that I think Abbott and Costello were the main source of inspiration for Biffle and Shooster's character, this particular short does seem to want to be a, quote, Laurel and Hardy comedy. Again, not only referencing the title, which the Biffle murder case, which I think is supposed to draw a connection to the Laurel Hardy murder case, but also the Shooster character at sometimes in the short does some slow burns looking into the camera, which is, I believe, supposed to make us think of Oliver Hardy. A slow burn, for people who are unaware, is basically when you have a character kind of exasperated by a situation that he's in or she's in, and they look directly into the camera and perhaps even sigh. In the terms of Laurel and Hardy, Oliver Hardy would do this after Stan Laurel said or did something, and his look into the camera was kind of him looking in at the audience, sort of suggesting, do you see what I have to put up with? What I like about this short and a lot of the other shorts, there are jokes coming at you in all directions. Sometimes it's the dialogue, it's something in the background. There's even jokes made in the ending credits. The ending credits actually provide the real information for who wrote and directed each comedy short, who did the cinematography. One line of dialogue in this movie, when after they discover the dead body, they call the police, and we find out that the home is located on Lapino Lane. Now, Lapino Lane, that was the name of an actor. That's Ida Lapito's cousin. Not everyone's going to get that joke, but someone like me with no life, I'm catching all the references here. So I find those little touches themselves funny. Overall, I did like the Biffle murder case. The next short on here is called Imitation of Wife. And that is supposed to be a play on words of a real movie called Imitation of Life. The background story with this short is it is the 9th comedy short starring Biffle and Shooster, and there's a little background drama associated with this piece. It seems that the plot was so heavily borrowed from Laurel and Hardy and Charlie Chase shorts that their producer, Hal Roach, admonished Biffle and Schuster's producer, telling him to be more original. This conflict, however, did not prevent Imitation of Wife from its scheduled release date of September 8th, 1935. You love how specific all of this is. It's directed by Ray McCary and stars Mae Bush, Vernon Dent, and Eddie Dunn. And the script is by Clyde Bruckman. The real Clyde Bruckman had worked with Buster Keaton, and I believe Harold Lloyd was an old comedy hand, even did some Three Stooges comedies. I think he wrote some of those. Ray McCary is the brother of Leo. So the beginning title cards telling us that this is supposed to be another Laurel and Hardy, Charlie Chase inspired short. In this one, Schuster, the story, the plot is, invites his boss, Vernon Dent. Vernon Dent, Three Stooges fans will know who he is. Schuster invites his boss over to his home for dinner, hoping that this will help him land a promotion at work. And Mae Bush, his wife, who here is played by Trish Geiger, becomes upset with Schuster and says she's going to go home to her mother. And she does this just before Dent and his nephew arrive. And meanwhile, Biffle, who had helped prepared the dinner with Schuster's wife, dresses up as Mrs. Schuster without telling his friend. And as usual happens in this kind of situation, one of the male characters finds Biffle attractive as a woman and begins to hit on him. And that serves as the justification for a lot of the humor in this particular short. This is actually kind of a rather believable plot for a two-reeler of the era. There are some missteps, some jokes that don't quite land. I'm not really sure why Biffle and Schuster go into a duet of Ain't We Got Fun. Again, none of the actors playing these real characters make any effort to sound like them. Some of the people don't even look like the people they're playing. Still, this is lighthearted and entertaining. One of those jokes that you have to keep your eye out for is at the end credits. One of the credits reads, "Drag Consultant, J. Edgar Hoover." You'll also see a photo, I believe it's of Michael Schlesinger. You'll see a photo in a frame of him. The next comedy short presented is Schmoboat, obviously a play on Showboat. This is a movie review with lots of singing and dancing. There really isn't a cohesive narrative, just a bunch of routines and songs put together. Here, Biffle and Schuster actually do a couple of old vaudeville routines. One of them is their version of a routine more commonly known as Slowly I Turned or Niagara Falls. Here, the way it's presented, it feels kind of rushed. They don't have the proper setup for it. It doesn't work as well as it should have. Within this routine, Biffle makes a reference to the Susquehanna Hat Company, and that is actually a reference to Abbott and Costello and a routine they did. They put it on film, I believe it was in their movie In Society, They did it on their television show as well, I believe. The routine itself is kind of a variation of the Slowly I Turned routine. They make another reference to Abbott and Costello. They do their version of the 7 times 13 equals 28. In Biffle and Shooster's version, it's 14 times 5 equals 25. Another highlight of this short that I liked is there's a scene where Biffle and Shooster are getting heckled. The heckler is played by Daniel Roebuck, whom I personally cannot look at and not think of Jay Leno. He played him in an HBO movie called The Late Shift in the mid-90s. And the heckler is constantly getting the best of Biffle and Shooster. Another interesting joke is at the end credits. The credit reads, "Dialogue coach for Mr. Kern." Mr. Kern is a reference to Jerome Kern, who appears here as well. The credit reads, "Dialogue coach for Mr. Kern M. Schlesinger." M. Schlesinger is, of course, the director, Michael Schlesinger. So I found that funny. The next short on here is called Bride of Finkelstein. And it is the 10th short that the team made together. It's a comedy horror piece. And we're told it has become the most widely seen Biffle and Shooster comedy. It was directed by Del Lord. He actually, again, another real person, directed a lot of Three Stooges comedies, and the Three Stooges themselves appeared in a lot of comedy horror shorts. One of them was directed by Del Lord. It's called Spook Louder. The Stooges also appeared in The Ghost Talks and If a Body Meets a Body. That was a remake of the Laurel Hardy murder case. This one stars Max Davidson and Vivian Oakland. Davidson was a popular Jewish comedian in the silent era. The actor playing Max Davidson is Phil Barron. And this is one of the few exceptions to what I had been saying, where an actor actually takes the time to look like the person they are playing. So Phil Barron actually tries to look like Davidson. Overall, I liked the performance. I like what he does with it. The best moment here is another variation of an old vaudeville routine, more commonly known as the mirror routine. They give us their interpretation of the mirror routine. I believe this was actually first put on the screen in 1916 in Charlie Chaplin's The Floor Walker. But the most famous example of this routine probably was done by the Marx Brothers in Duck Soup. So their version of this routine, I have to say, did make me laugh. The timing is a little bit off of it, but overall, again, it's another funny, harmless, light diversion. I did enjoy it. The last short presented, not counting a bonus short in the extras, is called It's a Frame-Up. And this is supposed to be the last short that Biffle and Shooster starred in. It was released in 1938. And Edgar Kennedy is in this one, played by Roebuck again, Arthur Houseman, and Franklin Pangborn. And it was directed by Preston Black, who, besides being a fellow Hungarian, his real name was Jack Weiss. He was sometimes credited as Jack White, and his brother was Jules White, who, of course, very well known director of Three Stooges comedies. Both of them had been around since the early days of silent cinema, and Preston Black, or Jack White, however you want to refer to him, he actually directed the Stooges comedy Disorder in the Court. I would say that that's probably one that Stooge fans consider among their best, if not their best. Here, in this one, again, another exception to the rule. The people playing Pangborn and Houseman are trying to capture the spirit of the people they're playing. Robert Picardo, who's going to be best known, I would think, to Star Trek fans, plays Houseman. Arthur Houseman, I think maybe I've seen one movie where he didn't play a drunk, and that was usually the character he always played, always in comedies. Was in a couple with Laurel and Hardy. Scram comes to mind. That's a 1932 short subject they did. Picardo, I feel his performance is just a bit too exaggerated. He has some scenes with Roebuck. They're trying to recall Duck Soup with Roebuck again playing Edgar Kennedy. His character works at a hot dog stand in Duck Soup. Edgar Kennedy worked at a lemonade stand. He had a lemonade stand and finds himself constantly fighting with Chico and Harpo. And so these moments are supposed to recall Duck Soup. They're okay. The biggest laugh in this one comes in some verbal banter between Biffle and Shooster. They're discussing a painting. But of all of them, this was probably my least favorite of the 5. But still, overall, I recommend the Misadventures of Biffle and Shooster. It is definitely worth buying, especially if you are a fan of classic comedy, whom this was clearly aimed at. Those that aren't quite familiar with classic comedy, I think may end up using this as an introduction. At least I'm willing to bet that would be the hope of Will Ryan and Nick Santamaria. After watching this, you would kind of say to yourself, gee, I like to see Laurel and Hardy and Abbott and Costello. I like to see who inspired this. And I think they would find that rewarding. I think it would be rewarding if it's something that can help introduce people to classic comedy, to classic cinema. So there you have it. My review, my look at the Misadventures of Biffle and Shooster. Check it out. You can buy it on Amazon. And that is a wrap for Critic Picks. Hope you enjoyed it. Take care, everyone. Thanks.